What kind of test can defeat Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva without a battle, without an army, and without a single arrow? The Mahabharata gives one stunning answer, a lake, a warning, and a set of questions. That is why the Yaksha episode still matters. It turns wisdom into survival, restraint into power, and one quiet conversation into one of the sharpest leadership tests in the entire epic. The scene begins during exile, when the Pandavas are already living under pressure, fatigue, and humiliation. They are not sitting in a calm school of philosophy. They are exhausted men trying to survive. That is important, because real character appears most clearly when the body is tired, the mind is strained, and urgency is screaming louder than principle. The Yaksha questions matter because they happen exactly there, under stress, not comfort. Versions of the episode differ in small details, but the emotional structure is clear. The brothers are desperate for water. Relief seems close. Then an unseen voice interrupts the most basic impulse of all: drink now, think later. That interruption is the whole point. The Mahabharata is asking whether human beings can pause before appetite, fear, and impulse take command. In other words, can power obey wisdom before power destroys itself? One by one, the brothers hear the warning and ignore it. Nakula falls. Sahadeva falls. Arjuna, master of focus, falls. Bhima, embodiment of force, falls. The pattern is brilliant. The epic is not humiliating them randomly. It is showing that beauty, knowledge, skill, and strength all fail when they refuse the discipline to stop and listen. The lake becomes a mirror. Each brother meets not an enemy outside, but a limit inside. By the time Yudhishthira arrives, the place looks less like a source of life and more like the aftermath of hidden judgment. His brothers lie there, and yet no visible battle explains it. That image still grips modern viewers because it feels so familiar. We live in an age that worships speed, reaction, and instant consumption. The Yaksha episode begins by asking a brutal question. What if the thing you rush toward most urgently is exactly where your judgment dies? Yudhishthira does something simple and extremely difficult. He stops. He does not begin by proving his strength. He does not answer mystery with aggression. He does not assume that visible need cancels invisible law. That pause is the first answer, even before he speaks. The Yaksha questions still matter because they teach that leadership begins not with domination, but with the ability to arrest the self long enough to understand what kind of situation you are truly standing inside. In many retellings, the Yaksha is linked to the form of a crane by the water. The disguise matters. Truth in the Mahabharata does not always arrive with thunder and spectacle. Sometimes it appears in a form easy to dismiss. That too feels modern. People often miss the decisive warning because it does not look grand enough to deserve obedience. The episode warns us that arrogance is not only pride in power. It is also contempt for quiet forms of authority. Bhima represents force. Arjuna represents mastery. Sahadeva represents knowledge. Nakula represents grace and composure. Yet all of them fail the same first principle. They treat the warning as an obstacle, not a revelation. This is why the lake scene is deeper than a riddle contest. It is a moral hierarchy. Before intelligence, before beauty, before warrior excellence, there is humility before reality. If that humility collapses, the rest of your gifts do not save you. Once Yudhishthira agrees to answer, the whole atmosphere changes. The episode stops being only about survival and becomes about fitness to lead. The Yaksha is not merely checking memory. He is testing proportion. Which human values are stable when fear enters? Which truths remain visible when the body is thirsty and grief is immediate? A ruler's mind is measured not when life is convenient, but when pain and necessity are begging him to abandon judgment. This is where Yudhishthira becomes more than the patient brother or the truthful king. He becomes a man willing to think before he grasps. That sounds obvious, but it is one of civilization's hardest disciplines. The Yaksha questions still matter because every serious crisis asks the same thing in a new costume. Will you obey impulse first, or reality first? Will you defend your ego, or will you submit to what truth demands before action can safely begin? The brilliance of the Yaksha dialogue is that the questions are not random. They cut into the basic illusions that make human beings foolish. What matters most? What makes life stable? What kind of person is truly rich? What path should someone follow when clever arguments clash with one another? These are not museum questions. They are the questions behind burnout, corruption, panic, vanity, and moral confusion now. That is why the scene refuses to become old. The most famous answer is about wonder. What is the greatest wonder? Yudhishthira answers that people see death all around them every day, yet still live as if they themselves will somehow escape it. That answer still lands because it names a deep human denial. We postpone what matters, inflate our egos, and waste moral attention because we act like time belongs to us indefinitely. The Yaksha questions matter because they puncture that fantasy cleanly. Another reason the episode still matters is its answer about the path. Human beings are overwhelmed by competing claims, rival authorities, and endless argument. Yudhishthira's response points away from mere cleverness. When reasoning conflicts and texts appear to pull in different directions, the path is recognized through lived wisdom, moral seriousness, and the conduct of those who genuinely embody Dharma. That is a warning against both blind literalism and arrogant self-certainty. Again and again, the answers favor inner order over outer possession. Contentment is treated as a truer wealth than accumulation. Self-command matters more than display. Good conduct protects more deeply than reputation alone. This is why the dialogue still feels fresh. It does not flatter appetite. It does not promise instant empowerment. It keeps returning to the harder claim that a disordered inner life will eventually corrupt whatever status, intelligence, or power a person happens to hold. And notice the setting of these answers. Yudhishthira is not delivering a lecture after victory. He is speaking while his brothers appear dead beside him. That makes the episode stronger, not softer. Wisdom here is not decorative. It is composure under pressure. The Yaksha questions still matter because they ask whether a person's philosophy survives contact with fear. If it does not, then it was never deep enough to guide action when life actually becomes severe. Then the episode becomes even more searching. The Yaksha, pleased by Yudhishthira's answers, offers him one brother back. This is the decisive turn, because now abstract wisdom must become a concrete choice. It is easy to sound wise while answering questions. It is harder to act wisely when love, grief, and strategic need are pulling you in different directions. The Yaksha questions still matter because they do not stop at words. They force character into decision. From a purely tactical point of view, the answer should seem obvious. Revive Bhima, the great force. Or revive Arjuna, the unmatched warrior. Any leader obsessed only with utility would calculate that way immediately. But Yudhishthira does not choose by raw advantage. That is why this moment endures. The epic asks whether Dharma is real only when circumstances are easy, or whether it can still govern choice when the efficient answer and the just answer are no longer the same. Yudhishthira chooses Nakula. The reason is unforgettable. Kunti still has one son alive in Yudhishthira himself, so Madri too should have one son restored through Nakula. This answer is not sentimental confusion. It is disciplined impartiality. Even in crisis, he refuses to let personal convenience erase balance between the two mothers. The choice reveals that his mind is still ordered by fairness even when grief could have justified a more self-serving calculation. That is the heart of why this episode still matters. Wisdom is not only knowing the right answer to a famous question. Wisdom is keeping moral proportion when pressure invites you to narrow your concern to yourself and your immediate interests. Yudhishthira shows that leadership is not simply choosing what helps your side fastest. Sometimes it is preserving justice in a way that keeps your inner order intact, even while urgency is begging you to compromise it. The revelation that follows completes the pattern. The Yaksha is no ordinary challenger, but Dharma himself in testing form. The brothers are restored, and the scene closes not as a trick solved, but as character confirmed. Yudhishthira has shown that his wisdom is not performative. It can hold steady under pain, temptation, and loss. That is why later generations kept returning to this moment. It offers a picture of rule shaped by conscience before force. So why do the Yaksha questions still matter? Because most people are still losing themselves at the edge of metaphorical lakes. We rush toward relief, status, speed, outrage, and appetite without first asking what kind of voice is warning us to stop. The scene exposes a permanent human pattern. Impulse feels urgent. Wisdom feels slow. But if you reverse that order, power collapses. The Mahabharata keeps this episode alive because modern intelligence has not solved that problem at all. It matters in personal life because it teaches self-command before desire. It matters in public life because it shows that leaders who cannot pause cannot judge. It matters intellectually because it distrusts the vanity of cleverness without character. And it matters spiritually because it reminds us that mortality, contentment, duty, and the path of life cannot be outsourced to noise, fashion, or instant opinion. These are questions each generation has to answer again. The episode also corrects a lazy reading of Yudhishthira. He is not only the man who hesitated in disaster or suffered through exile. Here he is sharp, composed, and morally exact. He listens when others do not. He answers without vanity. He chooses fairness over advantage. That is why the Yaksha scene balances his character so well. It shows what Yudhishthira looks like when Dharma is not trapped, but fully awake and acting with clear proportion. That is the lasting lesson. Civilization survives not only by producing strong people, but by producing people who can stop, listen, interpret, and choose justly under pressure. The Yaksha questions still matter because every age creates new lakes, new temptations, and new excuses to ignore warning. But the older test remains the same. Can your mind stay ordered when urgency becomes seductive? Next, we can ask why Balrama chose to walk away from Kurukshetra itself. So why do the Yaksha questions still matter? Because they show that wisdom is not decoration. It is survival, proportion, humility, and the courage to let truth interrupt desire before desire becomes disaster. If this episode helped you see the Mahabharata more deeply, like this video, subscribe to EkalavyaLearn, and turn on the bell icon to get new videos on time. The forest lake still speaks because human beings still need to learn how to stop and listen.